Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Four Mothers of the Women's Spirituality Online Resource Center. I'm your hostess, Vajra and the curator of the Resource Center. And today we are speaking with Dr. Heide Göttner Abendroth. Hello, Heidi. Heide, good morning.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. And it's just magical that I'm here on the west coast of the U.S. and you're in Germany.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
I'm fine too, thank you. It's great that we have this contact and can speak together.
It's so good to have you here. Your journey is so rich. Your work is so rich. What I'm going to do
thank
first,
you.
You are welcome. Thank you. What I'm going to do first is give a little introduction for everyone out there to put our interview into a larger context. And then I'm going to read your bio, and then we'll get started with hearing about your story. So I want to say to everyone that women's spirituality emerged as a major component of what's known as the second wave of women's liberation, which took place in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And women's spirituality emerged in the 70s and 80s with the Four Mothers, of which Heide is one very prominent one. Many people today, though, do not know about these courageous, radical, and by radical I mean to the root, Four Mothers of women's spirituality. These women developed authentic spiritual experiences and practices beyond the boundaries of patriarchal religion. These feminists followed their passion, their conviction, their inner knowing, and they built upon a growing body of scholarly knowledge, historical knowledge. And some of them also brought through intact indigenous wisdom to reconnect us with the nature and female-honoring spirituality that preceded the past 6,000 to 10,000 years of the patriarchal father gods. The Four Mothers, along with many other feminists, pioneered a diverse spiritual orientation based in respect, reverence, and relationship with all. These Four Mothers of this emergence are not only historically significant, but their work continues, for many of them, their work continues today. And that is why this resource center has been created, to provide an historical overview via personal testimonies and recollections of the formative first 2 decades of the women's spirituality movement, and to learn about the presence of their ongoing work today. We're inviting you to meet these women now in the form of taped interviews with additional interviews and resources to be expanded as time goes on. Our interview with Heide Göttner Abendroth today is taking place in the year 2018. And Heide, before we get going here, I want to read your bio so people get a real sense of the scope of your work. Dr. Heide Göttner Abendroth was born in Germany in 1941. She is a mother and a grandmother. She earned her PhD in philosophy and theory of science at the University of Munich, where she taught philosophy for 10 years, from 1973 to 1983. She has published extensively on matriarchal society and culture, and through her lifelong research on matriarchal societies, has become a founder of modern matriarchal studies. She's lectured in Europe and abroad, and her main work, Matriarchal Societies, Studies on Indigenous Cultures Across the Globe, has been published in German, English, Italian, and Spanish. She has been a visiting professor at the University of Montreal in Canada and at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. In 1986, she founded the International Academy Hagia.
Yes, it's Hagia. Academy Hagia.
Thank you, Heidi. International Academy Hagia for Matriarchal Studies and Matriarchal Spirituality. This was founded in Germany, and since then she has been its director. In 2003, she organized and guided the first World Congress on Matriarchal Studies in Luxembourg. In 2005, the second World Congress on Matriarchal Studies in San Marcos, Texas. and I attended that one. And a major conference on, it was wonderful.
Good.
And in 2011, a major conference on matriarchal studies and politics in Switzerland. In 2005, she was elected by the International Initiative 1,000 Peace Women Across the Globe as a nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2012, she received the Vajra Award for her scholarship from the Association for the Study of Women and Mythology in San Francisco. So, and her websites and contact information will be in text accompanying this interview. Heide, so wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm glad for this invitation, and thank you, Vajra. I'm glad that I can be here.
Well, I've been following your work for many years, and I'm really really happy that this interview is going to help bring it to some people who, many people know about you. You've done many interviews, but this particular venue, maybe we can reach even some more people.
Yes, it's really particular.
I wanted to ask you, first of all, what were the first inklings of women's spirituality for you? How did you discover it, or discover the goddess or feminist spirituality? What was the very beginning?
Yes, it's a good question at the beginning. You see, when the second wave feminism started in Germany, it was in the 70s. I was, as a young philosopher, in the midst of all this. And I presented there for the first time my new insights on the matriarchal type of society. The women avidly grasped it. It was a time of great enthusiasm. We were radically politicized, and we felt we were creating a completely new culture. During this time, my first book on matriarchy was published, as I had not been sure whether to start with matriarchal social forms or matriarchal political economy, which I researched all the time before. I just began with religion and spirituality in my book, The Goddess and Her Heroes, which was in English translated in 1995, but it came out in Germany already in 1980. In that time, I was approaching this material, fascinating as it was, in a scholarly attitude, as if all the various goddesses I encountered had nothing to do with me. But this calm situation was eroded by life's problems, and I found myself in a new, deep crisis. And in this time, since nothing was acceptable to me anymore, I experienced an inner strength that did not correspond to any official accepted tradition. Also, this brought me back to life again. I still could not identify it, so I gave it many goddess names, only tentative. And in that way, the power of the goddess, which I had written about in such a cool distance, swept over me, and this was my birth as a spiritual person. But this experience,
Heide, let me ask you,
yes.
What did that feel like, and how did that actually happen?
Yes, these are very personal details. I cannot tell about. I had no roots anyway, no traditional spiritual way in Germany, and so it was just by my studies that I encountered the goddess, and that she captured me.
So it's interesting that you go from, because I want people to understand that they can study and not have a direct relationship, but then
yes,
through
it's true.
Study.
That's true. I had no encounters with goddess before, but I studied it. I studied all the mythology patterns from the pre-patriarchal mythology patterns from Europe and West Asia and Egypt and so on, but it was in a scholarly way, and so. But this crisis was necessary to bring me closer to the goddess, so she caught me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want people to know that they can bridge from the scholarly into a direct relationship.
Yeah, it was that way.
How did you first get interested in matriarchal studies to begin with?
Yes. I want to add something with this experience I had. Then I would like to ask your question. The experience drove me to use my knowledge then of matriarchal mythology, symbolism, and ritual to develop matriarchal rituals. And also in this way, I had no teacher who helped me, so it was completely up to me to develop the practice of the new matriarchal mystery festivals. This is a process that I began spontaneously with a group of women artists in Switzerland. And from this collaboration, the festivals arose, and my background knowledge about matriarchal mythology helped me, and these artists were very great. They put it into scenery very quickly, and so we created together these matriarchal mystery festivals. And these matriarchal mystery festivals guided me further to create later the Academy Hagia. So this spirituality was the root of the Academy Hagia, and was the beginning of the Academy Hagia. So it started like that.
Yeah.
And how I encountered, the topic matriarchy I encountered much earlier when I read the work of Robert Graves and later Bachhofen and so on. I was discovering this. I was a young student at the university, and I was very much astonished that nobody talked about that. Nobody, what was in these books. And when I asked about why they don't teach that, I was I was silenced. They didn't want to hear it. So for myself, I continued with this topic. And so I had a double study. I studied officially philosophy, and unofficially, I went in all the libraries looking for this material. I studied matriarchal society and matriarchal knowledge, and I found a lot, but it very often was not named that, as that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why is it important to talk about matriarchy today?
Yeah, this is really a good question. You see, we are caught today in diverse forms of patriarchy, and they influence us not only by their political and economic forms, but also with our imagination and with our feelings and our individuality and so on and so on. And most of the people, we also are so deeply involved with it that we often cannot look through this till to the roots and till to the underlying deep structure. So, but we can do this and more if we know anything about a radically different model of society, which is matriarchy. And I want to state from the very beginning that matriarchy has nothing to do with women ruling over men, as the usual misinterpretation would have it. It's not the reversal of patriarchy. And I will give a short characteristic of this form of society now. Matriarchies are mother-centered societies with complementary equality between the genders and generations. And in this sense, they are all gender egalitarian and very often fully egalitarian societies. This means they have no hierarchies, no classes, no domination of one gender over the other. And they are based on maternal values. This means caretaking, nurturing, motherliness, peace building by negotiation, and no violence. No violence against women and children. These values hold for everybody, for mothers and those who are not mothers, and for women and men alike. And I think this is very interesting to study this. And I made the experience that it cannot be studied in history alone. We have only remnants there. So from the beginning, I am a cultural anthropologist or historian of culture, but I want to know how they make their politics, how they feel, how they discuss, and so on. And this I could study only with the still extant matriarchal societies of today. So I studied anthropology and ethnology in the last decades to get a deeper insight how these people in this society live and politicize, and so on and so on. And I could, let me say another basic thing with this. These societies are on principle need-oriented instead of power-oriented. And their principles aim to meet everybody's need with greatest benefit. So in matriarchies, motherhood, which originates as a biological fact, is transformed into a cultural model. And this intrigued me very, very much. And so I went on to study these societies as far as I could as a foreigner. I did it with ethnological literature and with many travels and with many meetings with indigenous women and men. So I could develop a clear picture of what a matriarchy is. And I think this picture helps us to look deeper and deeper through the patriarchal patterns in which we are involved, not only from the outside, but also in our inner feelings. So it helped me also to get more and more rid, step by step, from patriarchal patterns which I have internalized and which we are in everywhere and which we internalize always. So I think to get rid of patriarchy in ourselves and around ourselves, and also politically, we need the knowledge about matriarchal societies, a very deep and precise knowledge, so we can leave patriarchy behind and create a new form of society. I hope so.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I know you've spoken about the matriarchy being a liberation movement, can be considered a liberation movement for women and men. And you've been describing that, I think, right now.
Yes.
Do you have any particular practical ways in mind how that could
happen? Yes. How that is a good question. How this could happen? I'm always asked this question, and so I was thinking deeper and deeper about it. And in this way, I created the field of matriarchal politics, which just tries to answer this question. If I want to make matriarchal politics understandable, I would start with the situation of women today and not making a long speech about it, but only give an official statement about the situation of women today, which comes from a very official institution, which comes from the UN. In the UN report of 1980, you can read, women make up half of the world population, work nearly 2/3 of all hours worked, receive 1/10 of worldwide income, and own less than 1/100 of worldwide property. And today, 60%. Today they represent 60% of the world's poorest. This United Nations report was published in 1980, in 1990, in 2000, in 2010, and in 2018. This means there is a huge scandal, and no one seems to get worked up about that. But this cannot continue like this. And they publish it every year, and an expert told me it gets even worse, and nobody is outraged about this. So I think a fundamental demand of matriarchal politics is that 50% of all national wealth belongs to women and their projects. At present, working women pay the same taxes as men, and millions of mothers work free of charge. But 90% of the monetary flow pours into men's projects, international corporations, military, monumental eco-architecture, sports stadiums, and so on and so on. And I think this must stop. So I developed some principles and ideas of matriarchal politics, which aim to take up from matriarchal societies what we could learn there, and to change it in a new and modern form of matriarchal society. And some ideas of this I would just quote. I think I cannot say it all, but I focus now on the social sphere. I think women should start to establish new communities related by blood or affinity with their affinity sisters and brothers. And they have to own their houses on their own. They have to have their houses and their land on their own. And these houses should be multi-generational, and their motherhood is collective. And there is no more isolation than of mothers in nuclear families, and no social isolation of persons of any age group. And with this half-shared economy, women can do that. And with a shared economy, which I just mentioned before, women can start their own schools, their own academies, their own technical colleges, their universities, and import their own knowledge and values, which will be very soon matriarchal values, for mothers are at the center of these groups, and we know why.
Heide,
yeah.
I want to interject here because that is a
yes.
huge vision, and it is so fundamental. I want to give people time to absorb what you
Yes,
have.
yes, please, please.
And based on the UN report that
yeah.
being outraged by how 90% of the resources go to men, and how uncentered we are on women and the actual center of life. So you are giving us a picture of, am I getting
how to change this?
A picture of women starting to get on land and create housing for themselves according to their blood relations, their sisters and their brothers. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's that. Because you see, today it becomes increasingly clear that the social life is fragmented, and many people live isolated, which drags human beings down into a state of separation and loneliness and renders them sick and destructive, because we are social beings and not isolated individuals. And the basic social group is mother and children, and this is the most vulnerable group, and it is so much oppressed and vulnerated today. This must change. Around these groups, we need more groups of sisters, brothers, grandmothers who share a community with them and protect them. Because we know, we have the saying, to raise a child needs a whole village. I would say to raise a child needs a new matriarchal clan, which can be created by affinity groups symbolically. And to make this would be the first units of a new matriarchal society, but to bring this into practice, we need resources and the money, which is always stolen from women, so which very clearly is demonstrated by this UN report. And it's not only about new communities, also about new projects where women can bring their own values and their own ideas. For everywhere in the cultural sphere and the social sphere, women's projects are poor, and women have to beg for their own projects everywhere. This is a situation which cannot be tolerated. I think when women have this shared economy, they can run their own projects independently of male dominance, of male values, and of male worldviews. And I'm convinced then truly matriarchal groups, communities, and networks can arise and will arise quickly. Because they are egalitarian and friendly to life, and we like to live in a friendly atmosphere and egalitarian, not oppressed by some hierarchical and traditional patriarchal values and so on. So far, these are some short glimpses of what matriarchal politics can mean. They are still more about the matriarchal economy and culture and politics, but I cannot say it all. It's too much for the moment.
Of course you can't, and that's what your work is about. So you have books and material that people can educate themselves with. Definitely, they can get in touch with that and find that connected here with the interview. I know that at a certain point in your career as a university professor, you realized that the matriarchal discourse required a radical political stance that was difficult to achieve inside the academic world. And this experience was and is common to many women who are on the feminist path. Can you tell us more about your experience with that in academia?
Yes, I would like to do this. You see, by my short statements I just gave, that the term matriarchal is at once scholarly research. This field of matriarch is at once scholarly research, but secondly, it is also a political provocation, not only provocation, but a political vision. The term matriarchy is political in itself. So many people who try to make their career avoid it or find surrogate terms like matristic, matrifocal, and so on. I think these terms are too weak, because they don't express a political context which is involved in the term matriarchy, as I put it, and as I presented as a model which I could learn from indigenous societies. Of course, it was not good for my own career. When I had completed my PhD in philosophy at the University of Munich, as you told in my bio, I taught philosophy of science there for 10 years. But I had to leave it because no university in Germany or in Europe would accept my research on matriarchal societies. So I left university and started on my own and created the International Academy Hagia to do the research and teachings there. I devoted myself completely to this task, because I was encouraged by another audience than an academic one. These audience were women. So many women who wanted to know and who filled the rooms where I'm speaking. This was the beginning at the second wave enthusiasm at the second wave feminism, and continued till today. And today, what is very interesting, men who are younger, the younger men, are also coming and want to know more about this different model of society, because the pressure and the problems and the crisis of patriarchy, of the patriarchal society, becomes more and more obvious.
Yeah.
You see, in the feminist movement in Germany, it started, this research from my side, and this subject now is spreading worldwide due to so many women who are strongly interested in it. So it's the way. I cannot say more about it.
You really touched a vein, and you have really pioneered this road and these studies. It's just really massive, your vision and the research that you have done and what you're providing. I want to thank you for that. Personally, I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm passionate with this, so I have to go this way.
Yes, you are.
It gives me, you see, it empowers me as a woman, and it empowered many other women. So I'm very glad that I can be a medium to bring this to the women, also to men and to the world, because I think humanity needs a different model of society and culture than we have today.
Absolutely. Now, you've done the investigations. You've done a powerful investigation that bridges theory and practice, and you proposed a specific methodology. And in this direction, you go back over the first attempts to study matriarchy, such as by Bachofen and I think maybe Robert Graves.
Morgan,
what didn't
yes.
work in their analyses? What was off in their analyses?
Yeah. You see, this is a scholarly question with which I was very long. I was not satisfied when I read all these things about matriarchy, because I was not at all satisfied. You see, this tradition, I call it traditional matriarchal studies. It was done by men, and this is not always a problem, but it was done by men, and for a century this discussion on mother right and matriarchy continued. But they never gave a clear definition and a clear picture of what matriarchy is. So the subject, a lot of emotionality and patriarchal bias could creep in, and the subject was discussed and used and abused by all intellectual schools of thought and all political parties, each with their distinct, different point of view. And I just said it. What worried me most about this reception of the ideas on matriarchy was a complete lack of a clear definition of the matter at hand, and a lack of a developed methodology, and a lack of a scientific theoretical framework. So it happened that images of essence of women of those times crept into the idea of matriarchy and distorted and obscured this discussion till today. sometimes I got furious about that, and so I started with my intellectual tools of a philosopher of science to create a clear definition, an adequate methodology, and the huge and the theoretical framework which covered this huge field. And in this way, I tried, and I hope I was successful, to give this very interesting field a modern scientific foundation. And because this was a new approach, I called it then modern matriarchal studies to differentiate it from the traditional, not well-founded and ideological loan matriarchal studies. This is a big difference, I think, and I see how important this is. For when you look in anthropological or archaeological literature, they always begin with this distorted term of matriarchy, of women's rule, and everybody knows what it is, but no one gives a definition, and no one gives a definition which is based on empirical knowledge. I took my empirical knowledge from indigenous societies. They were my teachers what matriarchy is. So this definition which I gave of matriarchy as gender egalitarian, peaceful, not peaceful, but peace negotiation, and so on, I took it from indigenous society, which call themselves a matriarchy. As the Iroquois do, they call their society matriarchy. As the Minangkabau of Sumatra do, they call it matriarchy. And as the Mozo in China do, they call it matriarchy too. And they have all these egalitarian, gender egalitarian, and non-hierarchical patterns. So it's an empirically founded definition, and I hope it will help scholars who are interested in this field to proceed on this well-defined ground. And when I meet an archaeologist or an anthropologist who tells me that matriarchy is out because it's the rule of women, I tell them they have no knowledge of modern matriarchal studies, and they should look at this literature which has been published there. Then most of the time they are silent then and start to think. Good for them.
Now, you visited some of these societies. You've been to Southwest China, where you met the Mosuo people, and I remember them, the matriarchal people, Mosuo. And I remember a man from the Mosuo tribe speaking at the matriarchal studies meeting in Texas that I attended.
Yes, he was at our Congress. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it was fascinating. Mm-hmm. So what was it like to meet them, and are you still keeping up your relationship with them? And can you describe for our listeners some of the matriarchal parts, what their society is like?
Yes, you see, what their society is like. You see, I must put it very short. On the economic level, yes, they traditionally have a subsistence economy, a self-sufficient economy which support everybody there. But today the patriarchal state is mixing in. And what is interesting on the social level, they have this matrilineality, also the mother line, and they have the matrilocality, the clan or the extended family which is related in the motherline lives together in a big clan house. It was wonderfully to be in such a clan house and see how the people go on together. And when they make their decisions, they sit around the holy hearth, and discuss. The women sit on the left side, the men on the right side, and they discuss their matters until they have found a consensus. And this consensus-finding principle arises from the clan house and continues on the level of villages and towns and on the level of regions. When they make their political decisions, everybody is involved because they discuss it in the clan house, and then it goes till to the regional level from below. It's like a grassroots democracy. They do not need our formal democracy. They have their democracy, which is really a grassroots democracy. I could experience this with them also. And in the cultural field, it's clear they have this the veneration of Mother Earth, and very often they have local goddesses in their landscape, so the Mosoo call the lake, the beautiful Lugu Lake where they are living, Mother Lake, and a wonderful mountain who is stretching into this lake is a mountain mother. So the landscape is sacred to them, and so the local goddesses are found in the landscape, of course, and then they have the fire goddess, which is venerated as the holy hearth. So the whole worldview have these female deities, these immanent. They have no transcendent deities, divinities, but the whole world is divine. And this is expressed with these local goddesses of the lake, of the mountain, of the fire, and so on. The whole world is divine, and so they do not need transcendent, omnipotent gods who try to dominate and suppress everything. They don't need that. This was what I said now in short. I really could experience it with the Mosoo where I stayed with them. When I stayed with them with an all-women's group, we did research there, and we were very welcome with them.
Wonderful.
Yeah. The problem now for the Mosoo and many other matriarchal society is they are living in modern patriarchal nation states, and they are suppressed by them. And I will only explain it in short by the Mosoo. They are staying in the patriarchal China, and the principles of this patriarchal China are working to the detriment of women. Mm-hmm. So most of the Mosoo, but it has an interesting effect on the Mosoo, most of the Mosoo, like other matriarchal peoples, consciously cling to their traditions, even if they are heavily oppressed, here in this case by the Central Chinese government, and so they know very well what patriarchy is because they study Chinese social forms and are very proud on their own one. When we asked Mosoo men often, when they work outside of their society to earn some wages, they are often teased by patriarchal men who say to them, "Oh, you are following the will of your women, and you are ruled by your women." They say that, and then the Mosoo men answer, "And you are treating your women like animals." This is the answer of matriarchal men to patriarchal men. It's quite nice. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's
well
kind of
said.
in a nutshell.
You said. And you asked me how I can keep up my relations with them. Yeah. Yes. I tried to bring them and other men and women from indigenous matriarchal societies together. We did it with our first Congress on Matriarchal Studies in Luxembourg. We had some, I noticed by my researchers then that many non-indigenous scholars, or several non-indigenous scholars, worked on this interesting topic and didn't know each other, and they didn't know the indigenous scholars, so I thought we must bring them together. I did this with the first World Congress. Up till then, they have worked in relative isolation. And in 2005, I was invited to the U.S. to bring the Second World Congress there, and there I had the wonderful opportunity to bring more indigenous matriarchal scholars in. They came from Western China, they came from Africa, they came from North and South America, and they met there for the first time. And a young Mosoo woman scholar also told me, "Oh, I thought we were the only one in the world who had some backward traditional social patterns. But now I see there are several in the world, and they are very much appreciated by the white scholars. So I will really do my best to remain and to preserve and our own patterns, and now I'm proud on that."
That's wonderful, Heidi.
Yes, this was a very interesting effect. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I want to highlight that. I want to just really let that sink in, that you brought together these different matriarchal cultures that didn't know the others existed, and
yes.
that strengthens the whole sense of it, the whole bringing forth matriarchy into modern day consciousness, and strengthens them in holding their matriarchal consciousness and society. And that is just a huge connection that you've made there.
Yes. Yes, this is what I could do. I could bring the scholars who were working with this topic together, that we could create a network of scholars on matriarchal studies. And with the indigenous people, I learned so much from them, and I like to give something back. And this is what I could do for them, to bring them together, that they see their patterns are not backward, what all these patriarchal governments try to tell them. They have to develop into patriarchy, of course. No, we just said the opposite to them. We brought them together and made them a little bit more proud on their patterns, and that we want to learn from them. And so you said it quite rightly. So they became a little bit more proud of what they do, and I hope that we might help them, that they can remain their very interesting cultural patterns.
Yes. Help them hold that. But most people, Heide, you know this, most people, and probably most of our listeners, don't realize that there are these living matriarchal cultures still here on the earth, and they don't have a vision of they think they have the old idea of matriarchy being rule over one gender over
it's a Western idea. It's a Western idea.
It's a Western idea. It's all tainted by patriarchal thinking.
Right.
I love the vision of the grassroots democracy, and how it then goes up from there, from the grassroots, that the Masuo have. Now, in your book, Matriarchal Society, Studies on Indigenous Cultures Across the Globe, you refer there to the work done by indigenous researchers on their own societies.
Yes.
And so do you have some specific studies in mind that you could inform our listeners about?
Yes, right. I like to do, because I invited these very interesting scholars to the different congresses which we did. For example, on the Iroquois Society, this is the most famous of the matriarchal societies, because in history in 1851 Henry Louis Morgan did research on them, but he couldn't do it on his own. He was informed by the indigenous chiefs who had trust in him. So he described a perfect matriarchal pattern, a society which was not only a small, isolated community, but which is big, consisting of 5, later 6 huge tribes, which had a region lasting from the Atlantic to the Great Lakes. So, and they had some political forms to keep all these 5, later 6 nations, huge tribes together. It's very, very interesting. And today, Barbara Mann, who is a Seneca from the Bear Clan, takes up these traditions and again presents the history and the patterns of her society, partly by oral traditions, which she knows, of course, as an indigenous woman, and partly by reconstructed it from reports of the white colonizers. She does it excellently and brings again a wonderful picture of matriarchal society and of the women in it. Her book is really famous. The title is Women, Iroquois, the Ganto Visas, Iroquoian Women. I really love this book. And another example is a book of a Berber Kabyle of North Africa. It's a friend of mine, Malika. She writes about her own Berber culture, which is matriarchy, but which was colonized by the French, and she again brings up the old patterns and describes the magic of the Berber women when they are weaving, when they are doing, creating their pottery, their ceramics. These are all magic processes, and she describes this wonderfully so that we can understand this matriarch society really from a very deep perspective. And in China, there are several scholars now. The Professor Lamu Gattusa, whom we invited to our first and second congresses on modern matriarchal studies, he was teaching us about his own society. He's a Mozo professor, and today a lot of several Mozo professors for whom he was a teacher is continuing with the research on the Mozo in their classical matriarchal patterns and how they lived their resistance against the patriarchal Chinese government through the decades and through the centuries. It's very interesting, to name only few. And these are indigenous scholars who have to teach us so much.
Well, that's very inspiring. That is very inspiring, and I think this information is extremely important to get out to the more and more mainstream. It's absolutely paradigm busting, and it's trailblazing to get to. We need to know this in order to dismantle patriarchy.
Mm-hmm. And what is very interesting for me from the very beginning, we learn from them, and I'm very grateful to these indigenous teachers. And on the other hand, we have to think what we can change in our Western patriarch societies from within. These indigenous people, they try to preserve their cultures and get their self-domination back to some extent from the patriarchal governments. This is their way, and as far as I can, I cannot do much, but as far as I can, I support them. But we also have to support ourselves. We are women and mothers and critical men within a patriarchal society, and we do not want to continue with this patriarchal mess. I'm sorry to say that. We want to change it, and we change it from within. So we have to develop our vision how we can change a modern industrial patriarchy, a capitalist patriarch, from within into a different way of life. And this is a topic with which I am the topic which I'm dealing with in the matriarchal politics. I have some ideas, and I bring these ideas to everybody who want to listen, to audience who is interested in it, like the affinity communities, like subsistence economy, like a new spirituality which is already lived by many, many women worldwide as a goddess spirituality. These are very important very important parts of a new form of society. They are already here in different movements. For example, we have the ecological movement, we have a movement of communities, we have a movement of regionalism and subsistence economy. We have all this, and we have this very, very important feminist spirituality movement. They are all parts of a new possible matriarch society. So it's so important to go on with this movement and bridge the differences between them. This is our task we have to do in our Western patriarchal societies in Europe, in America, in Australia, everywhere where we are. And I think this can also help to overcome patriarchy.
Well said.
Sorry, it was a long statement. I didn't want to interrupt you, but sometimes I'm a bit too passionate with it.
Oh, you can never be too passionate, Heide. It keeps you going, and we need it. It's encouraging to hear you name the different aspects that are popping up in Western patriarchal culture. The ecology movement, the feminist spirituality, the communities. I think they're called what's it called? Not conscious communities, but all kinds of little movements that are really
big. They are not so little.
And caring for others instead of power over. Yeah.
Yeah, it's right. All this has some aspect of a more egalitarian and more earth-friendly way of life in mind. these are all aspects, and if you look at them and put the aspects together, then you are close to a matriarch society, a modern one. And I think a crucial movement is in this all is a feminist movement, because it goes to the roots of the problems, and especially the feminist spiritual movement, because this movement tries to bring all the pieces together. So it's so important.
I've maintained that spirituality is what creates politics. I mean, it's
yes.
your story of the world, your spiritual beliefs. Spirituality is actually relationship with what is around you. What is your relationship to the earth, to each other, to the cosmos? And from that comes our societal structure, of course.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So the spirituality is absolutely central. I know that when the second wave of feminism started, it was a political movement, and there was some feeling of, well, no, you're messing things up if you go to the spiritual, you know. And so the emergence of women's spirituality, feminist spirituality, goddess spirituality, earth spirituality, coming out of the second wave was really I think the core starting to emerge, the core of what will change the politics.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You see, it's another aspect in it. It's not possible for us to understand matriarchal societies without understanding something about spirituality, because every matriarchal society is deeply spiritual and is based on spiritual principles. So if we want to go our way in a matriarchal future, just as you have stated, spirituality is central. Spirituality which embraces all beings and all ways of life in an egalitarian and peaceful way, all life-supporting ways of life, of course, life-supporting and life-affirming ways. So spirituality is really at the core of the vision when we want to make some steps into a matriarchal future.
Yes, and I think it's so important for people to understand that and not just go to a knee-jerk matriarchy. Oh, well, that's just like patriarchy. You have really painted the picture. You've gathered the empirical evidence. You have studied actual matriarchal cultures. You have brought them together, and their own researchers of these various cultures. You've brought them together, and so I want people to really, really understand the importance of your work, and that it is really a paradigm-changing. It's matriarchy, as you have presented it and understand it and know it to be, is beneficial for all. It's really takes care of the needs for all. Is not power over. It benefits the earth. There's nothing. It's like exactly what we need, and I want people to understand the importance of your work and what it really is. What it really is.
Then you're perfectly right. I call it also a matriarchy paradigm, and this is the most radical paradigm which we can have today, for it's a perfectly new perspective on society and history, and on our ways of life, in our thinking, and so on. It changes it all, and this expression of matriarchy as women's rule, this is only a way of patriarchal thought to immunize themselves against any research and look into these different or completely different model of society, and they try to prevent us from doing research in matriarchal societies by always putting this very wrong idea on matriarchy at the front. It's a way to prevent us to look deeper into what's going on in patriarchy and what's going on in the real, still extant matriarchies. So we should throw it away and go on our way into to increase our knowledge about matriarchal societies and to bring our ideas about a new matriarchy future together.
Yes. and to recognize, as you said, the different aspects that are popping up in different ways, communities and ecology and feminist spirituality, etc., that it really is there, it really is arising, and you've given us a lens through which to view these different movements as really coming from that original spirituality, which is woman and child-centered, nurturing, taking care of the needs of all, connected to the earth, etc. As we come to the close here of our interview, I want to give you a chance to bring through anything else that you think is important that you would like to say to our listeners.
Yeah, I think not at the moment. It might be you have a very interesting question, and I can say something.
Well, I mean, you said so much. I just wanted to give you a few.
I said a lot.
It's because I like that we came to the core of spirituality and how you were saying. So that's the core.
Yes, I might add something from my personal statement from the beginning. When I created the International Academy Hagia, from the very beginning, we had a twin principle in it. We have one part is dedicated to scholarship and teaching about matriarchal societies, because we know so little about it, and we are prevented from this knowledge. So this is the one part, and the other part is the celebration of the matriarchal festivals. This combination, this twinship, this combination is not possible in any university and academia as they are structured today. So I in no way regret that I left university when I was a young woman and started my own academy. And women come again and again over the years, because just this combination of knowledge and of spirituality touches them and empowers them. And so I could go on with my way, and I'm so glad that my way and my teachings are also appreciated now internationally. And yes, this I wanted to say at my last statement.
Thanks.
And thank you that you invited me for this interview to bring it to more women and men what it's about with matriarchy.
Well, you are most welcome. We are the beneficiaries of your knowledge here in the interviews here today. So I want to encourage everyone who's listening to look at let's give the websites here verbally, and they will also be accompanied as text with the interview. The website is www.hagia.de. That's HAGIA.de, DE for Deutschland. And there's www.Göttner-Abendroth.de, and that is GOETTNER-ABENDROTH.de, and that's how you can get in touch with Heide's work. And thank you for listening today. Thank you, Heide, Dr. Heide Göttner-Abendroth.
Thank you also. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to have been here.
Blessed be.